When we are talking about the nodes, we are talking about the dance of the moon and the sun, which means that the lunar nodes stand for the tangible world, the world of experiences. This tangible world emanating from the sun, which is the origin, the consciousness, and the moon, the manifestation. And we will see that they draw a major link between psyche and matter, as they link consciousness with the meaning of the experiences. We know eclipses occur when the lunar nodes are close to the luminaries. And through the eclipses, we're going to enter a mythological approach of the nodes, because in India, they have a very beautiful myth. You know that in most mythologies, the eclipses are explained by a monster that devours the sun and the moon. And what's interesting is that in India, they have a myth that explains the birth of the node, and we will see much more than that. And the first point, very important point, is that Rahu and Ketu appear during the quest for the nectar of immortality. So they are linked to the spiritual quest from the start. We have, the stories goes like that, we have the Devas and the Asura. The Deva are the gods, the Asura the demons, but they are not Christian demons. They are not such bad guys, but they like more enjoyment, material enjoyment to spirituality. And the Deva are symbolizing let's say, the best part of ourselves, the part that are trying to understand spirituality. And this is Vishnu. Vishnu is a principle, and he is the supreme being, and he's going to advise the gods to form an alliance with the demons, light and darkness allying together to churn the sea of milk in order to produce the nectar of immortality. We can think that the sea of milk refers to the Milky Way. And a very important point, I'm going to come back a lot on that point. You can see around his right index finger what is called Sudarshana chakra, which is actually the ecliptic. So Vishnu has terms telling to the gods, only you, only the best part of us will taste the nectar of immortality. But for that, you have to form that alliance with your cousins and to accept their request. It talks about the deployment into the matter, into the material world. And you'll have to control your desires for the treasures that are going to rise from the ocean during the churning. It's a creation myth. And you'll have to control anger and rivalry towards the most obscure parts. And you will not fear the poison, because doing that action, lots of impurities are going to be generated and to spread over the sea of milk. And Shiva, which is also the supreme being, another image, will drink it. So you see on that picture, the gods and the demons are churning the sea of milk for 1,000 years. Another very important point, the Asura you see on the left are at the head of the snake, which means the Asura we will see are associated with Rahu, with the head of the dragon, the head of the serpent, and the Deva stand at the tail. We have in that story lots of tantric and yogic connections. The Mount Mandara is the churning rod and is spine. The turtle which is going to support the Mount Mandara is the Muladhara chakra, which is called the root chakra. And the serpent Vasuki, which is the churning rope, obviously associated with the snake of the lunar nodes, is the Kundalini. After all that time, the poison is generated and Shiva drinks the poison. Then we have the treasures of the ocean. In most of the texts, they speak about 14. Just let's think that, you see, you have the goddess of prosperity, Lakshmi, but you have also the goddess of wine. You have the feeding mother, which is the sacred cow. You have the celestial dancers associated to pleasure. And that figure you see down on the screen is the physician of the god. He looks like Vishnu because he's supposed to be an incarnation of Vishnu. He's Dhanvatari, the father of Indian medicine, Ayurveda, and he brings the nectar. So the nectar is done, and this is when the real business is starting, because Vishnu has to trick the demons not to have it. And is going to use Mohini, the enchantress, which is delusion personified. She's such a beautiful woman that gods and demons are going to be totally fascinated by her. And they're going to give her the nectar to be distributed among them. But one demon called Svarbanu is going to hide between the sun and the moon, and he drinks the nectar. He's exposed by the sun and the moon, and Vishnu beheads him with his chakra. Remember, the chakra, Sudarshana, is the ecliptic. So we have the astronomical explanation. Now Rahu and Ketu are immortal. They hunt the luminaries for revenge. They create eclipses. But the scriptures, some scriptures anyway, tell us that after this event, Rahu and Ketu were empowered to influence the lives of humans on Earth. So let's go back to Sudarshana chakra, because the chakra on that picture is on his left. This chakra is the ecliptic, the wheel of time, and actually the zodiac. It has 108 edges, which in Hindu astrology corresponds to the 27 lunar houses, each one divided into 4 padas. It is the ecliptic, it is the zodiac, it is the wheel of time that creates Rahu and Ketu. And as Rahu is associated with the Asura, we know that Rahu fuels the desire for experiences. Rahu attaches to time. And Ketu, which is associated with the Deva, the gods, pulls away from the desire of experiences. It detaches from time. The nectar of immortality, meaning the freedom from time. We are right into the divine game. When Vishnu creates with his chakra, with the ecliptic, when he creates Rahu and Ketu, the divine game starts. The divine game being the cycle of life and death. It is the beginning of time. And the game, the divine game, is going to unfold through the wheel of time and the zodiac. The game is played out within time, and the playground is the zodiac. The object of the quest, the object of the game is the quest for immortality.